Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this brand new webinar of our Governance Bites. Our September session will talk all about digital board evaluations. We have been working with the sector in the last few years to conduct various board effectiveness and evaluation reviews. So we thought during this COVID-19 time where there are no physical meetings, there are hardly any physical board evaluations happening, this webinar would help you understand how you can digitalize the process and still conduct an effective evaluation of your board should there be a need. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Vijaya Panangibali. I'm the head of governance at the Sport and Recreation Alliance. I have been with the Alliance for nearly 6 years now, and I have worked with various members from really small boards to really big boards to help them understand governance, the standards, the processes, etc. So I've been involved with various different pieces of governance work. But in the last 2 years, one of the work that has dominated is obviously looking at board effectiveness reviews, and I've conducted quite a lot of them since obviously the new code, sports code, has been adopted by most NGBs. So what I will do today is try and make you understand what the process involves, why is the process important, and also run through some of the practical elements of what we go through at the Alliance to conduct around an effective board evaluation or an effectiveness review. So I'm joined by my colleague Hayley today, Hayley Foster.
Hi, yes, good morning everyone. Thanks for joining us on this pre-recorded webinar. I have been Governance Officer at the Alliance for just coming up to 4 years now, so around 2 years shy of Vijaya. As Vijaya mentioned, we have seen such an increase in the need for external board evaluations, which I've been fortunate to work on over the past few years, and we just really hope that you can take away a lot of key learnings from today's session, and hopefully if you're looking for your own external board evaluation, you'll be able to pick up that discussion with us soon.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hayley. Thank you for the quick introduction. What I will do now is, for everybody's benefit, I will be sharing my slides and brilliant. Hope you're all able to see the slides here. So we've put together a slide deck, and we'll run through some of these elements with you. So you can just make note of all of the key and important factors that are involved in actually completing a 360-degree review. So as we've just mentioned, it's myself and my colleague Hayley who will run the presentation. As far as the aims of the session are concerned, we will be looking at the benefits of board effectiveness assessment, i.e. why look at a board effectiveness, and what would you as a board get at the end of an effectiveness review. What to target? It is one of the biggest questions that I have been asked when I began running this process, because it is quite confusing. A board effectiveness review could include as much information from your governance policies and processes as possible, to as very little as just conducting director interviews and completing the process. So there are various elements included. So we'll talk through to you what are the key elements to target during the review process. Obviously, there are two types of evaluations. There is an internal board evaluation, which should be conducted annually if it is at all possible. And there is, of course, the need for an external board evaluation, which is conducted by independent consultants such as ourselves at the Alliance, or another consultant who would bring in an external perspective and external view to this process. Again, like I've mentioned, COVID-19 has presented with so many roadblocks, but at the same time, one of the biggest opportunities for us is to digitalize how we work and how we see our work. So we at the Alliance have adopted to running digital board evaluations, and they have been working miraculously well with some of the boards that we've been conducting evaluations for. So we'll run through the process of what that involves and how we manage that process. My colleague Hayley will obviously run through the process and talk about the practical elements of what it's involved and share some tips with you how you can conduct an internal board evaluation for your process, for your board. And we will also look at some of the questions for the board to consider for this process. So again, like I've mentioned, the why factor, why would you need to conduct a board evaluation? The board performs three major roles in any company. So it provides direction, i.e. sets the strategic direction of the company. It controls, i.e. it monitors the management and the management team and provides support and advice. So there is also an advisory role involved for the board. So the effectiveness of the board really depends on a variety of factors, some of which are obviously the board structure, the culture and the dynamics of the board, the company's current strategy, your financial reporting processes and risk assessment, your role as a board. Is it a monitoring role or are you much more hands-on board, etc.? So it depends on the role of your board. It is very important to also consider that there is the role of the chair, which is one of the key elements, and of course the role of individual directors. Everybody comes onto the board, every director comes onto the board to provide the board with a different perspective. They bring in unique set of skills and experiences. So it is important to consider those roles of individual directors involved and how they all hone in together. So again, these are the elements that need to be reviewed, need to be evaluated. And one of the classic benefits of the board evaluation is that it encompasses all of these in one single process. Whilst some of the boards have different ways of assessing themselves, such as chairman or chairperson taking the feedback from the board, or having an annual board meeting just to discuss what is working, what is not working. These are the meetings that don't really include everything that I've mentioned here, i.e. discuss the current board structure or dynamics or the role of the board or the chair or individual directors. It will encompass immediately required elements such as focus on your financial reporting, the processes, risk assessments, for example, and the strategy. But only an external board evaluation always includes all of these elements to be reviewed at one time. So it is really important. This is why it is important for an external evaluation to be conducted every few years. You must be wondering, what are the benefits of effectiveness reviews or board evaluations? One of the questions that I always get asked from the chairpersons is, what do we get out of this? How can we make sure this process will help our board and ourselves? And I always mention to these boards, because one size doesn't fit all. As much as I'd love to say, yes, take a particular governance code and apply to it, and everybody will then have the same journey, I cannot, quite confidently state that as a fact. So you have to understand what is your journey, where is your journey heading to, and everybody's starting point is different. And therefore, the benefits of the assessment review will also vary, will also be very different. What I do mention to boards is that When you complete an external board evaluation, you obviously get the final report, your board gets to discuss. You will then have some really strong governance actions or tangible actions to take forward. And every board organically evolves to the next stage. I personally think, depending on how enthusiastic and how fast the board can implement the actions, the faster that you can actually start seeing the results, such as improved dialogue in the boardroom, improved relationships and culture. Sometimes it's improved agendas within the boardrooms, which saves quite a lot of time for the board as well. Again, without taking names here, I want to share a very quick example before we dwell into the benefits. One of the boards I've worked with, and they used to spend up to 4 hours at each meeting every 2 months discussing various elements, some operational and some strategic. So there was no line drawn between what is operational and what is strategic element for the board. And quite frankly, because the board was not refreshed for quite a long time, they've done things the way they were always been doing. There was no change in the process, no change in the thinking or the mentality of it. So when I've worked with the chairperson, we worked quite a lot in trying to understand what they want to achieve. And we've at the end of the day, when the review was completed and every single practical tip was implemented, the chairperson wrote to me to say their board meetings have gone from 4 hours to 3 hours, and their agenda has been shaped quite drastically to kind of include only the top level strategic elements that the board needs to discuss, because the board directors understood what their role is, and they understood there are very few items that were bordering line between operational and strategic. And because of that understanding, because of the value they wanted to create for the board by really looking at strategic elements, they have cut down their board meetings from 4 hours to 3 hours and still be very effective. So, and therefore, that's one of the benefits of conducting a board evaluation. You grow organically, you grow the board, and how effectively you operate. So without further ado, let me just talk to you a little bit about what the benefits or effectiveness reviews are. So first of all, it looks at leadership team. So again, it sets the performance tone and the culture of the organization. When I say leadership, obviously the chair is the leader of the board and CEO is the leader of the organization. So we'll look at both roles, and both roles will be assessed to make sure they work well together and they perform well in their duties they are supposed to. It is one of the key factors that we also look into, and the benefits of effectiveness review is the board culture. This is a soft governance element which is often overlooked and not always discussed. So again, we look at including appropriate board behaviors and or looking at what the current board behaviors are, and if there are any roadblocks, then we do help the board understand those to overcome them in the near future. Role clarity, one of the biggest barriers of effectiveness on boards is the role clarity. Every director comes onto the board wearing a different hat, whether they are a membership director, membership representative, they're appointed, or they are completely independent. So their view of their role on the board is different. Again, the benefit of an evaluation review is to clearly distinguish between the roles of the individual directors, the CEO, and of course the senior management. Teamwork, it builds better boards, it helps senior management and with the staff relationships. If there are any roadblocks that is actually hindering the right information coming to the board, or the information information from the board being passed on to the executives, then it does help remove such roadblocks as well. Accountability, one of the biggest element of a role of a director is your accountability. Again, there are quite a few things that some of the boards keep asking me who they're accountable to. Is that their funder, i.e. Sport England UK Sport, or is it their members, or is it their other part of stakeholders or partners or commercial partners, etc. So accountability really depends on the situation and the size and the nature of how your sport organization is run. So we will look into that, and one of the benefits of this is your improved stakeholder relationship, whether it's internal stakeholders or external. Decision making, again, try and understand who is the decision maker in which scenario, so it clarifies the strategic focus and organizational decision making processes as well. And finally, one of the benefits is the board policy. So obviously all boards have different policies adopted depending on their requirements, but it is sometimes really appropriate to just look at the top level policies and understand, are these still fit for purpose? So one of the benefits is that we look at board policies and procedures and help you understand if anything needs to be modified in order to make you a high performing board. So, like I've mentioned, some of the questions for the board to consider before you undertake a board evaluation task are as follows. I have again worked with some of the boards where they conducted a board evaluation because they needed to, but a huge and a vast majority of them really wanted to improve their governance, really wanted to improve the board relationships, and then conducted a board evaluation. But having said that, quite a lot of them did not actually have the ability to understand what the questions they need to consider before starting a process such as this. So here it is. I always ask boards to consider what is your competitive advantage or the additional value that your board is trying to deliver. This is in comparison to your peers, your stakeholders, or just looking internally at what your board has set goals for themselves to deliver. Again, look at your communication between the board and management. Again, very sensitive topic for many boards, but it is really important to look at how is this relationship, is this working well, is this professional enough, or is there anything that the board needs to do to improve that line of communication. Look at the company's current strategy. What are your future goals like, and in line with, if these goals are in line with the changes in the local economy, the political strategies, etc. So again, you need to look at the relevance of strategy. I know most of the boards do an annual review, or at least a mid review of their strategy to check how they have progressed. But I think some of the boards do miss the point to understand that the relevance of checking the board strategy is not on how well you have performed on the KPIs, but also to review if it is still relevant and fit for this purpose, because every minute we live is changing. The policies, the political economy with the COVID-19 situation, every moment is changing, and so therefore it is important for the board to consider that before you conduct a board evaluation. What value does each member of the board bring in? One of the golden questions I always ask at each board. What do they bring in terms of knowledge and experience? And if that is relevant for you to perform your company's overall strategy and create long-term value. What are the interests of your stakeholders or shareholders, along with the interests of your board and other partners, because everybody's interest is different, you see. So your stakeholders, i.e. your funded stakeholders, will want something from the board and from the organization. Your employees and your staff and volunteers will expect something else from you. So again, aligning all these interests and try and balance those interests as part of is a part of your role. So you need to consider these questions before you start conducting either an internal or an external evaluation. Again, some of the key elements to target here. If you are conducting an internal board evaluation, then please look at these top 4 elements. So first of all, it's important to look at the board structure. Within the board structure, you would be looking at the board composition, board diversity, board meetings, how they are set up, how they are run, are they in time, are they too long, are they too short, etc. And obviously looking at strategy versus operational elements, and how these affect your board structure. Looking at roles and responsibilities. So again, it is all about the role of not just individual directors, but also one of the key factors is looking at the role of the chair, looking at the executive team and the board relationships and their roles, and also looking at individual director performance, because we want all of the directors to contribute 100% of their skills and experience to the board. And if that is not happening at every single meeting, then that needs to be looked at. Again, that's one of the key elements when we look at reviewing the roles and responsibilities of the board. Looking at board relationships. So these are internal and external relationships. So we look at how the board is working with the executive team, how is the relationship working, and if the board is satisfied with the quality of papers that come to them in order for them to make an informed decision. We also look at board agenda and its relevance. Many boards actually have board agendas which have some historical relevance to it, because they've already agreed with the membership. These are the elements they discuss, or with stakeholders, that there are some standard board agenda items. So we look at that as well. So that is another thing to target during the evaluation process. Finally, the processes. So what we mean by the process is looking at board's internal controls. So what are your internal communications like? What are your internal reporting systems like? What are the policies and procedures that you follow? And focus on key issues such as succession planning for your board and for the rest of your executive team. Looking at member engagement. What is your process, engaging with your key stakeholders and key members, and also looking at your risk management process and if it is effective and fit for purpose for your board role. So if you are conducting an internal board evaluation, these are the key elements that you need to look at. So whatever the form or shape you take to conduct a board eval internally, please ensure that you target these key elements so that it encompasses all the processes and you receive all the good feedback from your directors. Like I've mentioned, there obviously are 2 different ways of conducting board evaluation. Internal evaluations are usually conducted on an annual basis. It is conducted by the chair in form of a questionnaire or individual director interview, so that it can take shape in either form. Again, self-evaluation is a process that systematically appraises the individual's performance. This allows directors to reflect on their individual and also board responsibilities. This method enables directors to reflect on their weaknesses and identify potential areas for improvement. So what we have here is a few different types of evaluation. So internal evaluation methods can vary from board to board. So the self-evaluation is all about the directors mentioning to the chair how effective they are and what can be improved. The 90-degree evaluation is one of the most basic forms of board evaluation. So in this method, the appraiser, perhaps the chairperson or a senior independent director, evaluates the other directors. So this appraisal method does not provide any form of self-evaluation. It just facilitates only one-way and top-down communication. So the chairperson or the senior independent director would actually discuss certain elements of what is working and what is not working, and that's it. It's just a top-down approach. The other approach some boards take is a 180-degree approach. The 180-degree evaluation is, again, another simple way to conduct the process, and it starts with self-evaluating using a questionnaire. The appraiser will then discuss the responses in a one-to-one meeting, and the evaluation is complete when the contents are agreed by both parties. So that's a simple 180-degree evaluation, and 360-degree evaluations are something a bit more, not just internal, but it also includes several relevant stakeholders within the organization. So i.e., you not just get feedback from the individual directors and have a discussion with them, but you also include external elements. A very simple process, very similar to a 360 review that we conduct for staff as well. So the 360 evaluation provides a well-rounded and balanced view of the performance. However, it is time consuming, and it is important to ensure that full confidentiality with regards to the feedback is received from your staff and volunteers within the organization. So there are a few factors that needs to be considered. External board evaluation methods are they vary from one consultant to another. What I personally seen is there are a few processes and few bespoke designs, and some of them use a combination of methods such as direct self-evaluation in terms of bespoke survey responses, or peer reviews, i.e. conducting a director effectiveness review, individual effectiveness review. It might be in the form of surveys and interviews. So depending on the style and the consultant you're using, they might use a combination of any of these methods. One of the benefits of external board evaluation is peer group comparison, because what we do when we conduct a board evaluation is obviously have an eagle eye view of how your board is performing as one entity. And because we have had some experience conducting other board evaluations as well, we understand the themes, we understand what the sector is going through, and we understand what the best practice expects boards to be like. So there is an element of that peer group comparison which you will not be able to get if you conduct just an internal evaluation on a regular basis. Again, there is also an element of looking at what's the best practice, and if it is a funded organization, then what does a code for sports governance does state how the board should be run, etc. So there is an element of including some external, not just best practice, but also the code comparisons as well. But one thing to remember when you are going for an external board evaluation is that you ensure that the consultant understands that not one size fits all, and you will always request, and you should always request for a scoping meeting ahead of the process begins, to understand what they're trying to evaluate, what you will get out of it, and if that process is in line with your thinking or not. Like I've mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to talk a little bit about the virtual board evaluations that we have begun this year. Like I've mentioned previously, the evolving situation with COVID-19 poses such a challenge to board in terms of effectiveness reviews and continuous professional development. Our virtual board evaluation services offers a seamless solution to those who want to continue conducting the board effectiveness reviews during this time. What we will provide as part of this process is initial consultation with your chair, CEO, and or your governance lead. So what we call this as this is a scoping meeting. So in the scoping meeting, we're trying to understand your expectations, what we can offer and what we can deliver, and if both these elements are aligned to ensure an effective review is conducted. Now that everything is digitalized, there will be a virtual board attendance for a board session. What this will include is just looking at the board dynamics and how the board interacts with each other, and also just looking at the level of dialogue that happens within the boardroom. So that helps us assess what is being discussed and how it is being discussed, i.e. if it is on the top operational level, or is it a strategic elements that being discussed in the boardroom, etc. We also look at your key board document. Without delving into any confidential elements, we do request if if you have some of for example, if you had some previous board evaluations conducted, so we look at reviewing those and what the responses are. We also look at the board skills matrix and some other policies such as succession planning, etc., if there is a need to review. So we will review some of the key board documents to ensure that what you expect from us, as part of the board evaluation is conducted thoroughly. Our process will include a one-to-one board interview process. So what happens during this process is we will bespoke or tailor-make a set of questions for director interviews. So these will be derived from a initial board survey that goes out with all the key factors that I've mentioned in my previous slide, including looking at board strategy, director relationships, effectiveness of the chair, and individual performance. What the one-to-one director interviews will look at is obviously digging deeper into some of the key issues that the board wants us to review, and also getting some candid feedback from directors to understand what is working and what can be better. How can the board improve moving forward? So this is very key for us to conduct one-to-one director interviews as part of the process, which we will do either via virtual meetings such as Zoom or just over the telephone as well. So once all these elements are reviewed and meetings attended, we will create a final review document with some key governance actions for the board to look at. We will present the final findings to the board at the next available board meeting for the board to ask us any questions should there be any, and of course it is after that it's up to the board to adopt and kind of take the governance actions moving forward. We do offer any support that the board might need during and after this process as well. For example, I understand when we have conducted board evaluation reviews, some of the boards have come back to us and said, we have actually now identified the gaps in these areas, and what can we do to improve further. So any assistance and consultation will be available just after the board reviews reports sent to your board. So this is how we conduct a virtual board evaluation without having to physically present at your board meeting or actually meet some of you in person. The process can still be as effective as if it were a physical board evaluation conducted. So that's the details of a virtual board evaluation. You can find all of these details on our web page, and of course we will share our contact details should you need to contact us after this webinar. So let me quickly run through the process that we take. I promise to make you understand what is the process that we undertake at the Alliance. I've mentioned some of this already as part of the virtual board evaluation, so I will not run through everything. But again, just looking at the scoping meetings, to the board surveys, to director interviews, and to the final review of the document, every single stage is carefully designed and bespoke made to meet the needs of your board requirements. And I think depends on what you as a sport organization will need to come out of this process, and what the chair or the CEO or the governance lead would mention. Every single element, or most of these elements, will be custom made to ensure that you get the best value out of this process. What I personally would like is basically for the boards to try and have this process as a mirror right in front of them. So you look at yourself, you self-reflect on your performance, and you self-reflect how well you're working together as a board, as a unit. And if there are some roadblocks, and if there are some suggestions for improvements, then you use this final review document to actually take some governance actions forward to make yourself a high-performing board. Here, my colleague will join me from here to talk you to the actual process that she helps me with, and what kind of elements are included in the process. So over to you, Hayley.
Thank you, Vijaya. Hi, everyone. So as Vijaya has mentioned, whilst there are quite a lot of facets associated with board evaluations, I'm going to take you through the core part of the data collection process, and also some of the basic concepts for how we formulise and analyse these. It is a mixture of surveys and interviews, and I'll explain some of the reasons for why we have this in a little bit. Just remember that some of this is based on experience of facilitating external board evaluations, but there are quite a few key learnings in here for you to consider. So I will take you through the survey creation, the survey analysis that we do, as well as the interview creation and the interview analysis. So if we just move on to the survey creation. So generally we give directors the same set of questions, because this really helps to facilitate a good comparison of responses across the board. Our survey is generally created using themes such as strategic objectives or the behaviour of the board. And this really helps to strengthen our analysis and give practical feedback and recommendations around the different areas which have been depicted in the themes. So we do have a mixture of qualitative and quantitative type questions, and we usually draw up these questions as targeted ones in the form of statements. So a statement could be, I attend board meetings regularly. And then the director will respond to these on a Likert scale, which I'm sure some of you will have seen. So strongly agree to strongly disagree. And using this sort of scale really helps to understand the underlying attitudes and opinions of directors. Whereas when we have a qualitative section, so a comment section, it helps the directors to expand on the choice that they've given. And of course, as Vijay has mentioned throughout, the data collection process is confidential, and because it's confidential and we give that assurance to our directors, it really promotes that candid and honest representation of the board. So that's the survey creation. So as Vijay mentioned earlier in the webinar, the board does have three main roles, and it's the evaluations remit to find out really whether the board is directing, monitoring and supporting the organisation. So when we do our analysis of the surveys, we summarise this, bearing those three things in mind, but summarising it under each theme that we've drawn up, and then we would provide a recommendation in relation to the theme, so such as the strategy and the behaviours, as I mentioned before. And of course, we use data representation to strengthen our analysis. So we use things such as bar charts, and this really helps us to clearly illustrate an overall picture of the director's response and give that eagle-eye view. Just to bear in mind, sometimes we do have anomalies that present throughout the data, and these can either be consistent or one-off. If they are consistent, sometimes we have directors who tick the box of strongly disagree throughout, and this is a red flag for us, of course. So this is why we use the interviews to help complement stuff like this. And as humans, obviously, we have a natural tendency to rank ourselves quite highly, and this is usually the case within any section that's based on individual performance. And again, that's why we have the interviews there, because it really helps us to gain a deeper understanding, and it gives the director a chance to express themselves in that space. So that's the surveys. Moving on to interview creation. So the surveys really do give us a good starting point, and more of a collective image of performance, particularly, as I mentioned, through that visual data element. But the one-to-one interviews, when they're really planned effectively, they can really elicit much more detailed and sensitive and that candid information that we've spoken about. When we do our external ones, sometimes we do include the executive team or senior leadership team, as we appreciate they also work closely with the board, and will also have a key perspective and valuable opinion to provide. And again, themes, much similar to the survey themes I mentioned. So it helps us with the thematic analysis that we do, and it helps us to match up the data or the transcripts to the survey data, which just makes the whole evaluation process much more consistent. And interviews are really effective when there is a potential issue of some sensitivity that needs to be addressed, because it's a safe space for directors to feel comfortable to discuss things that they feel they need to broach with us. And in terms of creating the actual questions, these should be open-ended, so not closed. It shouldn't be a case of directors being able to answer yes or no. It should be behaviour-based and probing. Just to note with probing, it's not there to make the interviewee feel uncomfortable, but it's there to help us or you to gain more comprehensive understanding of their experiences on the board. And the interview question should be streamlined. So if you make it as concise and within some kind of parameters that you've drawn up, that tends to be more useful to the overall evaluation and also to your actual interview. That doesn't mean setting rigid questions. If something needs to be discussed, then there should be that opportunity provided for that discussion. So that's the creation of interviews. Moving on to analysis. So as I've mentioned, we do this through thematic analysis. So this is where we identify any of the common themes or topics or patterns that have emerged across our discussions. And we need to do this because we have a lot of transcript at the end of discussions, as I'm sure you're aware of. So it's really important that we try and pull out those key themes. And when we write it up, we really need to articulate our point and make it as concise and summarised as possible, which is again where the thematic analysis comes in. Sometimes you can pull out direct quotes, of course, without impacting on confidentiality. And this really helps the board to see how their colleagues perceive them and how they are performing overall in their role. And of course, the board should be provided with tangible recommendations to take away from all of this. And this could include areas of specific training or a review of the structure or committees, for example. So that's the process we have for data collection. It was a very quick overview, but as I've said, you can take quite a few key learnings from that, depending on whether you're doing an internal or external evaluation yourself.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Hayley. I hope you all had a good understanding of why you should conduct the process, what the questions that the board need to asking themselves before you start a process such as this, and also some of the key elements that you need to consider. Either you are conducting a internal board evaluation or an external one. So whatever you do, regardless of the process you take, please make sure that it is relevant and that it is significant, not just for your board, to your stakeholders as well, and that you get value out of the process that's being conducted either internally or externally, because that is the key element for you to consider. What is the value that you will get out of this exercise? So think about these things. What I wanted to just share is information about our next governance bites. We will be talking about practical guide to business continuity. Again, one of the key themes that's come out of the COVID-19 situation is the business continuity and the process, and what the boards can do to look at it. So that will be our next session in October, followed by grassroots governance and how we can support and provide some guidance on how to sustain your grassroots with good governance. And finally, just a review of corporate governance and COVID-19 for the year that will be in December. Should you have any questions, here are our contact details. Myself and Hayley will be more than happy to take you through some of the responses. And so here we are. I hope you enjoyed the session and had a good takeaways from of the few key things that we've discussed today. Happy to take any questions later on. Please drop us an email in our inbox and we'll be more than happy to connect with you. So on that note, me and myself and my colleague Hayley wish you all the very best and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you all.